Welcome to the QuickPro camera guide for the Canon 7D Mark II. This is a great camera that will capture amazing images as well as HD video. We hope you'll enjoy learning more about it with this guide. This guide is meant to be a study tool to be used in connection with and not a replacement of your camera's owner's manual. You can watch it entirely in one sitting or by chapter. Let's get started. Your 7D Mark II has many sophisticated buttons and dials, and to take the best pictures with your camera, you want to be familiar with the functions of each of them. Let's begin by taking a closer look at many of the camera's features. Let's first take a look at the top of the camera. First, there is the power switch and the mode dial. In the center of the mode dial, there is the lock release. To change the shooting mode, press and hold this lock release while rotating the mode dial. Next, we'll find the hot shoe, where you can attach a variety of external flash units. This is the built-in flash, which will provide you extra light in certain shooting scenarios. This is the LCD panel, where you can access and control many of the shooting settings. Above the LCD panel, there are 4 buttons. First, there is the white balance metering button. To select the white balance setting, press the button and then rotate the quick control dial while watching the LCD panel. To change the metering mode, press the button and then rotate the main dial. The next button is the AF drive button, which will allow you to select the camera's autofocus mode and drive mode in conjunction with the main dial and quick control dial. The next button is the ISO flash compensation button, which will allow you to select the ISO setting as well as the flash exposure compensation. After the button has been pressed, use the main dial to select the ISO and the quick control dial to select the flash exposure compensation. The last button is the LCD panel illumination button. You can use this button in dimly lit conditions to make it easier to see the information that is displayed on the LCD panel. As we've discussed, this is the main dial. It's used to control the shutter speed in shutter priority and manual modes. It's also used in conjunction with a variety of other buttons to control camera settings. This is the multi-function button. Using this button, you can set the AF area selection mode. You can also assign a variety of custom controls to the multi-function button. And this is the shutter button. To take a picture, simply press this button halfway down to allow the camera to focus, and then press it the rest of the way to take the picture. Now let's take a look at this side of the camera. Here we'll find the card slot cover. Your camera can use both SD and compact flash memory cards. When you're inserting a memory card, you'll want to make sure that the manufacturer's logo is facing the back of the camera. Simply insert the card until it clicks into place and close the card slot cover. To remove a compact flash memory card, press the small gray lever and the card will eject. To remove an SD memory card, simply press the card and it will eject. Before you start taking pictures with a new memory card, it's a good idea to format it. Also, keep in mind that your camera will operate faster if you periodically format your memory card rather than simply deleting images from it to free up space for more picture taking. Make sure that you don't reformat your card unless you have already copied the images that you want to save to your computer. Formatting your card will erase all the images. To format a memory card, press the menu button and use the camera's multi-controller to navigate to the first Setup menu tab, indicated by a wrench icon with the first dot highlighted. Navigate to the Format Card option and press Set. Here you need to select the card that you'd like to format and press Set. Select OK and press Set again. This is the remote control sensor, which allows an optional remote control to communicate with the camera. This is the self-timer lamp. When the self-timer is used, the self-timer lamp will illuminate. This is the depth of field preview button. You can press and hold this button while looking through the viewfinder to see the effects of the aperture setting on the final image. On this side of the camera, you'll find the terminal cover, where you can connect the camera to other devices. Here you'll find the microphone and headphone terminals. This is the PC terminal, which will allow you to connect an external flash unit using a sync cord. This is the remote control terminal. Here you'll find the USB terminal, which will allow you to connect the camera to a computer, standard definition TV, or compatible printer. This is the HDMI terminal, which will allow you to connect the camera to an HD TV. This is the built-in microphone, which will record sound in movie mode. Take care not to cover the microphone during movie recording. This is the flash button. In the camera's auto mode, the flash will pop up and fire automatically in poor lighting conditions. In the other shooting modes, simply press the flash button to raise the flash. Also on this side of the camera, there is the lens release button. When you want to detach a lens, press and hold the lens release button while holding the camera with the same hand, and then with the other hand, rotate the lens until it uncouples. Avoid changing lenses in windy or dusty conditions. This will help the image sensor stay clean and free of dust. To attach a lens, make sure that the camera is switched to off. Hold the camera with one hand and the lens with the other like this. Align the lens's index with the camera's index of the same color. Then gently rotate the lens until it clicks into place. Take great care not to scratch the lens by allowing it to make contact with anything. Now let's take a look at the back of the camera. The most prominent feature is the LCD monitor. This monitor serves several purposes. First, it displays images that have been taken. Using the camera's quick control dial, you can scroll through the images on the memory card. Second, when the quick control button is pressed, the LCD monitor provides fast and easy access to several of the camera's settings in the quick control screen. Third, when the menu button is pressed, the LCD monitor displays the camera's menu system, where you can change many important settings in the camera. Finally, when the Start/Stop button is pressed, the LCD monitor provides a live view of the scene. Directly above the LCD monitor is the viewfinder, where you can see camera settings when you're taking pictures. Before you start taking pictures, you'll want to focus the viewfinder. To do this, use the diopter adjustment knob located to the right of the eye cup. Simply rotate the knob until the automatic focus points in the viewfinder are in sharp focus. At the bottom of the viewfinder display, you can see the battery check, the shutter speed, aperture, exposure level indicator, the ISO setting, the maximum burst, and the focus confirmation light. Over the scene, you will see the active focus point. This is the menu button. Pressing this button will allow you to access the camera's sophisticated menu system. This is the info button. In the camera's shooting, playback, and live view modes, pressing this button will display helpful information. We'll discuss more about the camera's display settings later in this guide. This button has three functions. First, it is the Creative Photo button. In the camera's shooting modes, pressing this button will provide fast access to the picture styles, multiple exposure settings, and HDR setting. In playback mode, you can press this button to display a comparative playback, which will allow you to view two images side by side. This is the rating button. Using this button, you can assign star ratings to your images in camera. This is a great way to keep note of which images are your favorites while you're shooting. This is the Index Magnify Reduce button, which is used in the camera's playback mode. Using this button in conjunction with the main dial, you'll be able to view your images as thumbnails, and you'll be able to zoom in on detail areas of the image to check focus. This is the playback button. Pressing this button will allow you to view your images on the LCD monitor. This button is the erase button, which will allow you to erase images from the memory card in playback mode. This is the Live View Movie Shooting switch, which allows you to select whether you'd like to use Live View to shoot still images or record movies. This is the Start/Stop button. When the Live View Movie Shooting switch is set to movie, the Start/Stop button can be pressed to start and end movie recording. When the switch is set to live view shooting, the button can be pressed to enter and exit live view shooting. This is the AF on button. Just as pressing the shutter button halfway down, you can press and hold this button to use autofocus. This is the AE lock button. When the shutter button is pressed and held halfway down, you can press the AE lock button to lock the exposure while you recompose the image. This is the AF point selection button. Pressing this button will allow you to select the AF point that you'd like to use. As we've discussed, this is the multi-controller, which allows you to access a variety of camera controls and functions. This is the AF area selection lever. This is the quick control button. Pressing this button will activate the quick control screen. Here you can use the multi-controller and quick control dial to adjust a variety of camera settings. This is the quick control dial. As we've discussed, this dial can be used to access and adjust a variety of camera settings. This is the set button, which is used to confirm settings and menu selections. This is the access lamp. When illuminated, this lamp indicates that the memory card is being read or written to. Do not remove the memory card while this lamp is lit. This is the multi-function lock switch. When it's set to lock, the main dial, quick control dial, and multi-controller will be locked from making changes inadvertently. Your 7D Mark II has a variety of image quality settings that will allow you to capture images with resolution, file format, and compression you need for your scenario. Let's take a moment to discuss the camera's image quality options. Your Canon 7D Mark II can record image files in two different image quality settings, or file types, RAW and JPEG. First, there is the RAW setting. RAW files are not actually image files. They're actually the raw data saved to the memory card directly from the image sensor. This means that RAW files must be processed on the computer before they're printed. Next, RAW file sizes are considerably larger than JPEG files. RAW files have a much broader range of tones. Shadow and highlight areas have more detail than other image files. And you can extensively edit RAW files without losing image data. The last image quality setting on the 7D Mark II is JPEG. JPEG files are a standard compressed file format that is supported by any image software. Because JPEG files are compressed, the file sizes are very small compared to RAW image files. But they also have much narrower range of tones and will lose some image data each time they're saved. Let's take a look at how to select the image quality settings on the 7D Mark II. The image quality options are accessed in the camera's menu system under the first shooting tab. Here you can use the main dial to select the RAW quality setting and the quick control dial to select the JPEG quality setting. There are three different RAW options: RAW, medium RAW, and small RAW. The difference between the different RAW options is the resolution. The first RAW option will use all 20 megapixels to record images. The medium RAW option will use 11 megapixels. The small RAW option will use 5 megapixels. Below the RAW options, there are the JPEG options. You'll notice that for each of the large, medium, and small quality settings, there are two settings. This icon represents the fine quality JPEG setting, which is a higher quality with less compression. This icon represents the normal quality JPEG with more compression. Both formats will use the same number of pixels to record the image. The only difference is the compression of the file. For the small JPEG settings, there are also S2 and S3 options. The S2 setting would be good to choose if you're only playing the image on a digital photo frame, and the S3 setting is good if you're only using the images for email or posting online. The camera will record whichever combination of RAW and JPEG files you have selected. So if you select medium RAW for the RAW setting and large normal quality for the JPEG setting, the camera will record one 11 megapixel RAW file as well as one normal quality 20 megapixel JPEG file each time a picture is taken. If you select the dash for either setting, the camera will not record an image in that file format. However, if both the RAW and JPEG settings are set to the dash, the camera will record one large 20 megapixel RAW file as well as one large fine quality JPEG file each time a picture is taken. One of the most important concepts in photography is exposure, or the amount of light that falls on the camera's image sensor or film. A properly exposed photo will have good detail in the shadow, midtone, and highlight areas. Photos that are too bright are overexposed, and photos that are too dark are underexposed. The camera uses metering modes to determine proper exposure settings. To select a metering mode, press the metering mode button. Then rotate the main dial to choose one of the 4 metering modes. The first metering mode is called evaluative metering. This is a great general use metering mode that can be used in most shooting scenarios. The camera sets the exposure automatically to suit the scene. This is a good mode to use for many situations, but sometimes when the scene is very bright or very dark, you may want to use a different metering mode. The next metering mode is partial metering. This is a good mode to choose when the background is much brighter than the subject. Partial metering covers about 6.2% of the viewfinder area at the center. The next metering mode is spot metering. Spot metering is very similar to partial metering, except that it covers a much smaller area of the frame. Spot metering only uses about 1.5% of the viewfinder area at the center. This is a good mode to choose if you want to meter from only a very specific area of the frame. The last mode is center-weighted metering. This is a classic metering mode used for portraits. Center-weighted metering will evaluate the entire frame and assign the greatest weight to the center area. Now that you know a little about how your camera sees and measures light to create properly exposed photos, let's talk a little about the shooting modes on the 7D Mark II. Your camera's shooting modes allow you to take creative control over the camera's settings like aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, flash, as well as a variety of other settings. To select a shooting mode, press and hold the mode dial lock release button and rotate the mode dial. The first mode is Scene Intelligent Auto and is indicated with a green A+ icon on the mode dial. In this mode, the camera will do all of the work for you, and all you need to do is point and shoot. The next mode is called Program AE and is represented with a P on the mode dial. In this mode, the camera automatically adjusts shutter speed and aperture for optimal exposure, but you can change the aperture and shutter speed combinations to suit your needs. To operate in this mode, press and hold the lock release and rotate the mode dial to select P. Press and hold the AF on button or shutter button halfway down to focus, and then press the shutter button all the way down to take the picture. You may find that the shutter speed is too slow for what you're photographing, or that the aperture does not give you the depth of field that you're looking for. If you'd like to change the camera's shutter speed and aperture combination, simply rotate the main dial. Rotate the dial to the right for large aperture openings and fast shutter speeds, and rotate the dial to the left for small aperture openings and slow shutter speeds. For each of the programmed auto, shutter priority, and aperture priority modes, you can adjust the overall brightness of the image with exposure compensation. To use exposure compensation, simply rotate the quick control dial. Values with a plus sign will make the image brighter, and values with a minus sign will make the image darker. The next shooting mode is the TV or shutter priority mode. The shutter priority mode is useful for times when you want to control motion in a scene, whether it's freezing action or blurring the motion of the subject. In this mode, you will set the shutter speed, and the camera will select an appropriate aperture value for proper exposure. To use the camera in shutter priority mode, select TV using the lock release and the mode dial. To select the shutter speed, rotate the main dial. The Canon 7D Mark II has shutter speeds that range from very slow, 30 full seconds, to very fast, 1/8,000th of a second. You can view the shutter speed and aperture values on the LCD panel through the camera's viewfinder or on the LCD monitor. The next shooting mode is the AV, or Aperture Priority Mode. The Aperture Priority Mode is useful for times when you want to control the depth of field in an image. Depth of field is the term used to describe the distance between the nearest and farthest objects in a scene that appear acceptably sharp in an image. When only a small area or subject in an image is in focus, it will have a shallow depth of field. This effect is achieved by using a small f-stop number. When everything in both the foreground and background is in focus, an image has a long depth of field. For a long depth of field, choose a large f-stop number. When you're shooting in aperture priority mode, you'll set the aperture and the camera will automatically select the correct shutter speed for proper exposure. To use this mode, select AV on the mode dial. To select an aperture value, rotate the main dial as you watch the display on the LCD panel, LCD monitor, or through the viewfinder. Once you have made your selection, press the AF on button or the shutter button halfway to focus and press the shutter button completely to take the picture. The next shooting mode is manual mode. This mode gives you complete control of the camera. In manual mode, you will select both the shutter speed and aperture to select the exposure. To operate the camera in manual mode, select M on the mode dial. To set the shutter speed, rotate the main dial. To set the aperture, rotate the quick control dial. Press the shutter button halfway so that as you're making adjustments to the aperture and shutter speed, you can watch the exposure scale on the LCD panel, LCD monitor, or through the viewfinder. When the exposure level indicator is near the center of the scale, the image should be properly exposed. You can choose just the right aperture and shutter speed combination for your scene, whether you want to freeze action or create a very shallow depth of field. Make the necessary adjustments to the aperture and shutter speed and press the AF on or shutter button halfway down to focus, and press the shutter button to take the picture. The next shooting mode is bulb. This is a great mode to use for night scenes, fireworks, and other subjects that need very long exposures. In this mode, the shutter will stay open as long as the shutter button is held down. To operate the camera in bulb mode, rotate the mode dial to B. To set the aperture, you can rotate either the main dial or the quick control dial. Press the AF on button or the shutter button halfway down to focus, and then press and hold the shutter button to take the picture. The next three modes on the mode dial are the C1, C2, and C3 modes. These are the camera's custom shooting modes, where you can register camera settings so they can be quickly and easily recalled simply by setting the mode dial to that custom shooting mode. To register settings to one of these modes, you'll first want to make adjustments to all of the settings that you'd like to be registered. You can register the shooting mode and exposure settings, as well as focus settings, metering mode, drive mode, and exposure and flash compensation. Let's make adjustments to several of these settings and register a custom shooting mode now. You can select the shooting mode and the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO settings. You can also select the focus settings. Note that even the AF point can be registered to the custom shooting mode. Now that we've made our selections, we can register these settings to one of the custom shooting modes. To do this, we'll enter the camera's menu system and navigate to the fourth Setup tab. Here we'll select Custom Shooting Mode and Register Settings. Now we can select the custom shooting mode we'd like and select OK when prompted. Now, when the custom shooting mode that we registered is selected on the mode dial, all of the registered settings will be instantly recalled. In addition to aperture and shutter speed, the camera's ISO setting will have a significant impact on whether your images are properly exposed. The ISO sets the image sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the number, the less light that is required to properly expose the image sensor. You can either have the camera automatically choose the sensitivity, or you can set it manually. To set the ISO on the 7D Mark II, press the ISO button and select the ISO by rotating the main dial while watching the LCD panel or the LCD monitor. You can select ISO Auto, and you can also choose from ISOs ranging from 100 to 51,200. The other way to set the ISO on the 7D Mark II is in the Quick Control screen. Press the Quick Control button and use the multi-controller to navigate to the ISO option. Now you can use the Quick Control dial to set the ISO setting. When the camera is set to use ISO Auto, it will automatically select an appropriate ISO setting. But the great thing about the Auto ISO on the 7D Mark II is that it works in conjunction with a selected minimum shutter speed that you can set according to your scenario. The Auto ISO options are accessed in the second shooting menu under ISO Speed Settings. Here you can simply select the ISO setting, and you can set the ISO speed range. You can set the minimum and maximum that you'd like the camera to allow to be selected. This is also where you can enable ISOs 25,600 and 51,200. Once you've made your selections, highlight OK and press Set. This menu is also where you can set the controls for the Auto ISO options. First, you can set the Auto ISO range. Again, you can select your minimum and maximum settings that you'd like the camera to use. Now you can set the minimum shutter speed. If Auto is selected, you can rotate the main dial to make the minimum shutter speeds either slower or faster than the standard Auto settings. Under Manual, you can choose any other shutter speed you'd like. This setting will set the slowest shutter speed that the camera will use. If the shutter speed drops to slower than what you have selected here, the camera will increase the ISO to keep the shutter speed at the minimum that you have selected. It's a good idea to set the ISO speed to suit the ambient light setting that you're shooting in. When you increase the ISO speed to a higher number for low light, a faster shutter speed can be used to avoid blurry images. The image sensor on your camera is very powerful. It will allow you to use a very high ISO setting and still have great images. Keep in mind, however, that some very high ISO settings will introduce digital noise or grain into your images. You'll want to experiment with the camera's ISO settings to become familiar with their range and control. Here's a guide that will help you have a basic idea of what ISO settings to use in various situations. When you're outdoors in full sun, use ISO 100 to 200. In the shade, on an overcast day, or indoors with lots of window light, use ISO 400. ISOs 800 and higher should be used indoors for action shots or in other low light conditions. Now that we've discussed shooting modes and ISO settings, let's take a minute to talk about the camera's drive modes. The drive modes determine how many times the shutter releases when you press the shutter button. To set the drive mode, simply press the drive mode button and then rotate the quick control dial while watching the LCD panel or LCD monitor. The 7D Mark II has single shooting, high-speed continuous shooting, low-speed continuous shooting, silent single shooting, silent continuous shooting, 10-second self-timer remote control, and 2-second self-timer remote control. In the single shooting drive mode, one picture will be taken when you press the shutter button completely. This is a good mode for stationary subjects. The high-speed continuous shooting drive mode will record up to 6 frames per second while the shutter button is pressed down completely. If you use an optional battery pack, the camera can record up to 6 frames per second. The low-speed continuous shooting drive mode will record up to 3 frames per second while the shutter button is pressed down completely. The silent shooting drive mode is like the single shooting drive mode, except that the shutter is much quieter than in the single shooting drive mode. This is a great mode to use when you don't want to disrupt quiet surroundings. The silent continuous shooting drive mode is like the low-speed continuous shooting drive mode, but the shutter is much quieter, making it more appropriate for use in quiet surroundings. The 10-second and 2-second self-timer modes take the picture 10 or 2 seconds after the shutter button is pressed completely. Use this mode for self-portraits or with a tripod to reduce camera shake at very slow shutter speeds. These are also the drive modes that you would want to select when you're using an optional remote control. The Canon 7D Mark II has two great features that you can use to capture great photos and amazing HD video. Let's discuss the camera's live view and movie modes. To shoot in live view, make sure that the live view movie shooting switch is set to live view, then press the start-stop button. Please note that it's important to avoid directing the camera's lens toward the sun in live view and movie modes, as this can seriously damage the camera's internal components. Before you start shooting in live view, you'll want to select the Live View AF mode. To choose the AF mode in live view, simply press the quick control button and select the AF method setting. Here, you can choose from any of the live view AF modes. The first mode is face tracking. In this mode, the camera will find and focus on human faces in the scene. If a face that the camera is focusing on moves, the AF area will track the face to maintain focus. If multiple faces are detected, you can use the multi-controller to select the face that you'd like the camera to focus on. If the camera does not detect any faces in the scene, it will automatically switch to the FlexiZone Multi-AF mode. To focus, press the shutter button halfway down. The AF point will turn green and a beep will sound. Then simply press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. The next AF mode in live view is FlexiZone Multi. In this mode, you can choose to have the camera use a wide area, or you can select one of the 9 AF zones. To toggle between wide area and zone, press the set button or the multi-controller. When the wide area is used, the camera will automatically focus using one or several of the AF points when the shutter button is pressed halfway. If the camera does not focus on the desired subject, you can use one of the 9 zones. When zone is selected, you can use the multi-controller to scroll to the desired zone. When one of the zones is selected, the camera will automatically choose an AF point from the points that are in the selected zone for focus. Again, press the shutter button down halfway. When the AF points appear in green and the beep sounds, press the shutter button the rest of the way to take the picture. The next AF mode is FlexiZone Single. With this mode, the single AF point is used to focus the subject, which makes it easy to focus exactly where you intended. You can use the multi-controller to place the AF point anywhere on the screen. Then, simply press the shutter button halfway down, and when the AF point turns green, press it the rest of the way to take the picture. In live view, you can make adjustments to the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO settings, just like you would in normal shooting. If you'd like to see the effects of these settings on exposure, you can use the Live View Exposure Simulation. To do this, enter the camera's 5th Shooting Menu tab and select Exposure Simulation. Here, choose Enable. Now, the live view scene will show the image brightness very close to what the final image will be. In the default live view screen, several important shooting settings are displayed on screen in the live view information display. Note that the items displayed will vary depending on the shooting mode that you have selected. We'll be showing the information that is displayed when the camera is set to manual mode. Here, you'll see the shutter speed, the aperture, the exposure level, and the ISO setting. At the top of the screen, you'll see the possible shots, the maximum burst, and the battery check. To show another information display, press the Info button. In addition to the settings that were previously displayed, you'll see the shooting mode, focus method, the drive mode, the metering mode, focus point, the card for recording and playback, the image quality setting, the white balance setting, the picture style, the auto lighting optimizer, and this icon indicates that exposure simulation is activated. Pressing the info button again will display a real-time histogram of the scene to help you monitor the overall exposure. And pressing the info button again will display the camera's electronic level. The electronic level will show whether the camera is level in the horizontal, vertical, and forward-backward positions. In addition to live view, your 7D Mark II is also capable of shooting high-quality HD video. When shooting movies, you'll want to make sure that you're using a memory card that is capable of recording data fast enough for movies. If you're recording full HD movies, use an SD memory card. Canon recommends that you use a card with a 20 megabyte per second read-write speed. If you're using a compact flash card, you'll want to use a card with a 30 megabyte per second read-write speed. If a slower memory card is used, the movie may not be properly recorded. Just like capturing still photos, you can set the camera to record video at different resolutions or recording sizes. The 7D Mark II has 3 resolution settings: 1920 by 1080, 1280 by 720, and 640 by 480. Each of these recording sizes have different frame rate and compression method options. To access the camera's movie recording settings, first make sure that the Live View movie switch is set to movie. Then enter the camera's menu system and navigate to the 4th shooting tab. Here, select the movie recording quality option and the movie recording size. There is a variety of information shown at the top of this screen to indicate the settings for the selected option. Here you'll see the resolution, the frame rate, the recording time remaining, the file type the movies will be saved as, and this setting is the compression method. There are 5 options for the 1920 by 1080 resolution. These settings will allow you to capture full HD video. The next 2 options are for the 1280 by 720 resolution. These are good options when you want to have high quality video, but it doesn't need to be full HD. The 1280 by 720 recording size could be used for family home movies or similar scenarios. The bottom option on the right side of the screen is 640 by 480. This is a lower resolution setting that is good for when you know that you only want to use the movie for emailing or posting online. In addition to the movie resolution, the movie frame rate will impact the movie quality. Choosing 24 frames per second will closely imitate the look that you would get if you're using a film video camera. 30 frames per second is more like what you would see on television. 60 frames per second is an option that would be good for recording fast action video. You'll also notice that there are 2 different compression options on the 7D Mark II. IPB and All-I. The IPB compression method will compress multiple frames at once for more efficient recording in smaller file sizes. The All-I method will compress all the frames one at a time for a movie file that is more suited for editing, but will also be a larger file. The purpose or use of the finished video will help you decide which recording size, frame rate, and compression method to use. Keep in mind that the higher the resolution, the larger the file sizes will be. Now that we've discussed movie recording size options, let's talk about how to actually record movies with the 7D Mark II. First, you'll need to select the shooting mode. If you choose Scene Intelligent Auto, Program AE, or Bulb, the exposure will be set automatically. In shutter priority and aperture priority modes, you will have access to the same exposure controls for shutter speed and aperture as you do in still shooting. In manual mode, you'll also have control over the ISO setting. Note that the shutter speeds available in movie recording will depend on the frame rate that you have selected. When shooting movies with moving subjects, it's a good idea to keep the shutter speed in the range of 1/30th of a second to 1/125th of a second. If you use a faster shutter speed, the motion will not appear as smooth. To begin movie recording, make sure that the Live View movie switch is set to movie. Then, focus using the methods that we have discussed in the Live View shooting section of this guide. And to start recording, press the Start/Stop button. While the movie is recording, the recording movie icon will be displayed at the top corner of the screen. If you'd like to shoot a still image while recording a movie, simply press the shutter button completely. The movie file will have a still moment that will last about 1 second at the time the still image was taken. To end recording, press the Start/Stop button again. Your movie files will be saved as MOV files. To view a movie that you have recorded, press the Playback button, and if necessary, use the quick control dial to find the movie that you'd like to play. Press the Set button to enter the playback mode, and press the Set button again to access the playback controls. From here, you can press the multi-controller or the Set button to play the movie. You can control the volume of the sound that is played back with the main dial. With the 7D Mark II, you have the ability to edit movies within the movie playback. Use the multi-controller to select Edit. Here you can select Cut Beginning or Cut End. Press Set. Now you can use the multi-controller to fast forward or rewind the movie. The portion of your movie that is shown in white in the playback position bar is what will remain. Press Set and select Save. Here you can choose New File, Overwrite, or Cancel. We'll select New File, press Set, select OK, and press Set again. Note that selecting Overwrite will erase the original movie and replace it with the edited version. To record sound in movie mode, the 7D Mark II has a built-in microphone, which will record sound automatically by default. If you'd like to change the microphone sensitivity or turn off sound recording, you can do this through the camera's menu system. Enter the fourth shooting tab, select Sound Recording. Here you can select Auto, Manual, or Disable. If you select Manual, you can adjust the recording level to suit your needs. You can also choose whether or not you'd like the wind filter or attenuator to be enabled. If you're shooting movies outdoors in windy conditions, enabling the filter will reduce the noise caused by wind. If there's no wind or you're shooting indoors, you'll want to disable the filter, as the sound will be more natural than it would be if the filter were enabled. When enabled, the attenuator will allow you to cut back the audio gain. If you're shooting a concert, for example, and the audio levels are clipping, you can enable and adjust the attenuator to bring the audio to an acceptable range. The 7D Mark II has a large LCD monitor where you can review images, adjust menu settings, and access the quick control screen. There are many options available for previewing images, and many of the camera's settings can easily be accessed through the quick control screen. Let's discuss how to use these camera features. For basic playback of your images on the camera's LCD monitor, simply press the Playback button. Then you can use the quick control dial to scroll through the images. If you'd like to jump forward or backward 10 images, you can rotate the main dial. You can change the function of the main dial in the playback mode in the camera's playback menu. If you have a large number of images recorded on the memory card, you may find that it's faster to find the photos that you would like to view if you display multiple photos on the screen at once. To do this, press the Magnify button and the current image will be magnified. Then you can rotate the main dial to the left to zoom out on the image and continue rotating the main dial to display the image index. You can display 4, 9, 36, or 100 images in the index, depending on how many times you rotate the main dial. From any thumbnail display, you can use the quick control dial or the multi-controller to scroll through the image thumbnails. To view an image full screen, you can press the multi-controller or the Set button. As discussed, you can also magnify images on the LCD monitor. This is especially useful when you want to check for good focus in detail areas of the photo. Press the Magnify button to zoom the image. Here you can rotate the main dial to increase or decrease the level of the zoom. Then you can use the multi-controller to scroll top to bottom and side to side on the photo. If you rotate the quick control dial, you can scroll through the images on the card at the same level of magnification. As you're scrolling through photos in the camera's playback, you may find some images that you'd like to protect from being accidentally erased. To protect an image, enter the menu system and select the first playback menu. The first menu item is Protect Images. Here you can choose how to select the images that you'd like to protect. We'll just choose Select Images. Now simply scroll through the images on the memory card and press the Set button when you find one that you'd like to protect. A small key icon will appear at the top of the image. You can continue scrolling and protecting images in the same way. When you're finished, you can press the menu button and return to the menu, or you can press the shutter button halfway to resume picture taking. If you find a photo that didn't turn out, you can delete it from your memory card by pressing the Erase button. When the dialog appears, select Erase and press Set, and the image will be removed from the memory card. Note that once an image is erased, it cannot be recovered. Another useful playback feature on the 7D Mark II is image rating. With this feature, you can assign star ratings to images in movies on the memory card. In playback, select an image that you'd like to apply a star rating to, then press the rating button. Each time you press the rating button, the star rating will increase by 1 star up to 5 stars and then back to off. There are several different playback screens on the 7D Mark II. Let's take a look at each of them now. The first and default playback screen is the No Information screen, and it's simply a full screen display of the image. Additional information about the image can be viewed by pressing the Info button. Each time the Info button is pressed, a different set of information will be displayed. The next display option is the Basic Information display. Here you can see the shutter speed, aperture, ISO setting, and image quality. At the top of the screen, you'll see the image number out of the total number of images, the battery indicator, the memory card, and the folder number and the file number. The next display is the shooting information display and can be viewed by pressing the Info button. In addition to the information that was shown in the basic info display, you'll see the histogram of the image, which gives a basic idea of the tone distribution of the image. If the histogram data is shifted toward the left side of the graph, the image will probably be dark or underexposed. If the histogram is shifted to the right side of the graph, the image will be too bright or overexposed. In most cases, a properly exposed photo will have the data distributed over the whole graph or in the center of the graph. The histogram will help you have a basic idea of the overall exposure of your image when you're outdoors in bright sunlight and the photos are difficult to see on the LCD monitor. In the shooting information display, you'll also see the shooting mode, shutter speed, aperture, ISO setting, white balance, picture style, metering mode, auto lighting optimizer setting, image quality setting, and the file size. In the camera's playback mode, you can press the Quick Control button to display several Quick Control playback options. You can use the multi-controller to navigate through the options, and you can use the Quick Control dial or multi-controller to make selections. First, there is the Protect Images option, which allows you to quickly protect the currently displayed image. The Rotate Image option will allow you to rotate the image by 90 degrees in each direction. The Rating option is another way to apply ratings to your image. The next option is the Raw Image Processing. This will allow you to create a JPEG copy of your raw image. You can choose Disable or No Processing. Use Shot Settings, which will simply create a JPEG using the settings that were used when the photo was taken. Or you can select Customize Raw Processing, which will allow you to make adjustments to a variety of settings before you save a JPEG copy of the image. You can make changes to the brightness adjustment, the color space, the white balance, the peripheral illumination correction. This setting corrects vignetting that can be caused by certain lenses, the picture style, the distortion correction, the auto lighting optimizer, the chromatic aberration correction, the high ISO noise reduction, and the image quality. To make changes to any of these options, press Set and use the multi-controller or quick control dial to make your selections. When you're satisfied with your changes, select Save and OK. The JPEG copy will be saved to the memory card. The next option in the Quick Control Playback is the Resize option, where you can save a resized copy of the image to the memory card. You can choose from options ranging from 8.9 megapixels and 0.3 megapixels. The next option, Highlight Alert, will allow you to have the camera to warn you if certain areas of your photos are overexposed. In this playback display, areas that are very overexposed and have lost detail and highlights will blink in black. The AF point display option will allow you to see which AF point was used when the photo was taken. And the image jump option will allow you to select the method that you would like the camera to use for the image jump feature. You can choose to have the camera jump 1, 10, or 100 images. And you can also choose to display images by date, by folder, movies only, still images only, protected images only, or by rating. One other useful playback feature on the 7D Mark II is the two-image display, where you can see two images side by side on the LCD monitor. To use this feature, simply press the comparative playback button while in the playback mode. Press Set to switch the frame between the two images, and rotate the quick control dial to scroll through images in that frame. In the comparative playback, you can view several different information displays by pressing the Info button. To magnify an image, press the Magnify button and rotate the main dial. To match the magnification setting for the compared image, press Set and then press the Quick Control button. To temporarily view a full screen display of the image that is selected in the blue frame, press and hold the Playback button. In the comparative display, you can also apply ratings to or erase the image that is selected with the frame. Let's discuss the focus modes that are available on the 7D Mark II. When you're choosing the focus mode, the main thing that you'll want to think about is whether or not the subject is in motion. The Canon 7D Mark II has a sophisticated autofocus system with a variety of autofocus modes and AF area selection modes that, when used well together, will help you get great focus regardless of what type of subject you're photographing. Understanding how all of the modes and areas work together might seem a little confusing, but this chapter of this guide will help you know when to use each autofocus mode as well as each autofocus area mode. Let's first discuss the camera's three autofocus modes: one shot, AI focus, and AI servo. To choose an autofocus mode on the 7D Mark II, press the AF button and then rotate the main dial while watching the LCD panel or LCD monitor. Another way to select the AF mode on the 7D Mark II is through the Quick Control screen. Press the Quick Control button and use the multi-controller to navigate to the AF mode setting. Here you can use the Quick Control dial to scroll through the options, or you can press Set and use the Quick Control dial or main dial to make your selection. The first focus mode is one shot and is best suited for stationary subjects. Choose this mode when you're photographing objects or when you're doing portrait work with an older child or adult. When focus is achieved, the AF point which achieved focus will flash in red in the viewfinder, and the focus confirmation light in the viewfinder will also light. The AI Servo AF mode is best for photographing moving subjects and is best for use when focusing distance keeps changing. Use this mode when you're photographing sporting events, small children, or animals. While you hold down the shutter button halfway, the subject will be focused continuously. When the AF point selection is automatic, the camera first uses the center AF point to focus. During autofocusing, if the subject moves away from the center AF point, focus tracking continues as long as the subject is covered by another AF point. In the AI focus mode, the focus mode automatically switches from one-shot AF to AI servo if the still subject starts moving. After the subject is focused in the one-shot AF mode, if the subject starts moving, the camera will detect the movement and will change the AF mode automatically to AI servo. The 7D Mark II has a great feature for photographing moving subjects with the AI servo mode called the AF configuration tool. With this tool, you can select an AI servo AF option based on the characteristics of the moving subject you're photographing. To access the AF configuration tool, press the menu button and navigate to the first AF menu. Here you'll see the 6 different cases or characteristics to choose from. Case 1 is a good general purpose option for any moving subject. Case 2 will continue to track a moving subject regardless of obstacles. This is a good setting to choose for tennis players, swimmers, skiers, or similar subjects. Case 3 will instantly focus on a subject entering the AF points. This would be a good setting to choose if you're photographing the starting line of a race, for example. Case 4 is a good setting to choose if you're taking pictures of subjects that accelerate or decelerate quickly, such as motorsports or basketball players. Case 5 is a good setting to choose for subjects that move unpredictably, like figure skaters. And Case 6 is a good mode to choose for subjects that move unpredictably and change speed. Examples of these types of subjects would be gymnasts or dancers. Before we begin discussing the autofocus area selection modes, please note that autofocus modes and autofocus area selection modes are different settings but function together. Understanding how they work together will help your images have great focus. To choose the AF area selection mode, press the AF point selection button and press the multifunction button or rotate the AF area selection lever to make your selection. There are 6 basic AF area selection modes: single point spot AF, single point AF, 4 AF point expansion, 8 AF point surround expansion, zone AF, large zone AF, and auto AF point selection. Once you've selected the AF area selection mode, you'll need to select the AF point. To do this, press the AF point selection button to activate the AF points. Now you can use the multi-controller to select the AF point, or you can use the main dial or quick control dial. Rotating the main dial will scroll horizontally through the AF points, and rotating the quick control dial will scroll vertically through the AF points. The single point spot AF mode is great for when you want to manually select a very small area of the frame for focus. This is great for pinpoint focus of overlapping subjects, such as animals in cages. In this mode, you will manually select the exact focus point that you would like the camera to use for focus. The single point AF mode is similar to single point spot AF, but the focus points are slightly larger. Use this mode when you want to manually select and focus on a small area, such as the subject's eye or other small object. With this mode, you'll select one of the camera's 65 focus points that you'd like to use. The next 2 AF area selection modes are the AF point expansion modes. The AF point expansion mode will use a manually selected focus point, plus 4 adjacent AF points to focus the image. You'll select the primary focus point, and the camera will use the 4 additional focus points if the subject does not have enough detail to use the selected AF point. With the AF point expansion surrounding points mode, the camera will use the 8 focus points that surround the manually selected focus point. These modes are good to use for moving subjects or subjects that have little detail or texture. With the Zone AF mode, the 65 AF points are divided into 9 selections or zones. All of the points in the selected zone are used for autofocus, and the camera will focus on the nearest subject within the selected zone. This is a good mode to use for moving subjects. But since the camera automatically focuses on the nearest subject, it may be more difficult to focus on a very specific subject. The large Zone AF mode functions just like the Zone AF mode, but there are only 3 zones to choose from instead of 9. The last AF area selection mode is Auto AF Point Selection. In this mode, all 65 AF points will be used for autofocus. The way that this mode works depends on the AF mode that you have selected. If you're using one-shot AF, the camera will use the AF point that is over the nearest subject. If you're using AI Servo AF, you'll select the starting AF point, and if the subject moves away from that point, the camera will automatically use other AF points to track the subject. The last of the focusing modes is the manual focus or MF mode. To use the camera's manual focus, simply switch the focus mode switch on the lens to MF. This gives you the control to manually focus on any subject through the viewfinder by using the focus ring. Sometimes a photo may have poor focus, but it's not related to the camera's focus mode or focus area mode. Camera shake happens when the camera moves while the shutter is open, exposing the image sensor. Always try to steady the camera. Holding it with 2 hands and pressing the viewfinder gently against your face will help. You can also lean against something or use a tripod, a monopod, or even a beanbag to steady the camera. You can also reduce the effect of camera shake by selecting a fast shutter speed. This reduces the amount of time the image sensor is exposed to shaky conditions. A helpful rule of thumb is to set your shutter speed to 1 over the focal length. Confusing? Let me explain. If the focal length of your lens is 300 millimeters, for example, you should set your shutter speed to at least 1/300th of a second. If the focal length is 50 millimeters, you might get by using a shutter speed as low as 1/60th of a second. Let's take a look at the 7D Mark II's sophisticated menu system. To access the menus, simply press the menu button. There are 5 different menus, each with several tabs. Note that menu items will vary depending on the shooting mode that is selected. We'll walk through the menu system with the camera set to the Program Auto Shooting mode. Let's first take a look at the shooting menu items. The first item in the first tab is Image Quality, where you can select the RAW and JPEG image quality and size settings. Next, there is Image Review. This is where you can select the length of time that you'd like the image to be displayed on the LCD monitor immediately after it's taken. The Beep menu item will allow you to enable or disable the beep that sounds when the camera uses autofocus. Next, there is Shutter Release without card. This item will allow you to choose whether you'd like to be able to take pictures without a memory card in the camera. The Lens Aberration Correction menu item will allow you to apply correction for chromatic aberration as well as peripheral illumination or a vignette effect in camera. Next, there is Flash Control, which will allow you to make adjustments to many settings for the built-in or external flash. The second shooting tab begins with Exposure Compensation Auto Exposure Bracketing. With this menu item, you can set the increment or stop for the exposure compensation and exposure bracketing. Next, there is ISO speed settings. This menu item allows you to set the ISO speed, range, auto ISO range, and the minimum shutter speed when ISO auto is used. Next, there is Auto Lighting Optimizer setting. You can choose from off, low, standard, and high. If you press the Info button, you can disable the auto lighting optimizer when the camera is in manual mode. Next, there is the white balance menu item, where you can select the white balance setting. The custom white balance is where you can set the custom white balance. Next, there is white balance shift bracket. With this option, you can use the multi-controller to fine-tune the white balance setting. And you can set the amount of variation in color for white balance bracketed shots. Next, there is color space option. Your camera has two color space options. Some photographers prefer the sRGB mode, as it requires less processing later. Other photographers prefer the Adobe RGB mode, as this mode has a wider range of colors, making it a preferred option for images that will be extensively processed on the computer. The third shooting menu begins with the picture style setting, where you can select and modify a picture style. The next two options, long exposure noise reduction and high ISO noise reduction, will allow you to enable noise reduction for long exposures, as well as set the level of noise reduction for images taken at high ISO settings. Next, there is highlight tone priority, which you can set to enable or disable. We'll discuss highlight tone priority in greater detail in Chapter 8 of this guide. Dust delete data is next. With this option, you can take a photo to use in conjunction with software to remove dust spots automatically from photos when post-processing. The multiple exposure menu item is where you can set up the camera to take multiple exposure photos. The HDR mode menu item is where you can set up the camera to capture HDR images. We'll discuss more about HDR images in Chapter 8 of this guide. The fourth shooting menu begins with red eye reduction, where you can enable or disable the red eye reduction feature for photos when the flash is used. Interval timer is next. With this option, you can set up the camera to do interval timer photography. With bulb timer, you can select a preset time for the bulb exposure, so you will not need to hold the shutter button down in bulb mode. Anti-flicker shooting is next. When enabled, anti-flicker shooting will detect the frequency of fluorescent light sources and capture the image to minimize the flicker's effect on exposure. The final item in the fourth shooting menu is mirror lockup, which will allow you to lock the mirror in the up position to minimize camera shake at very slow shutter speeds. The fifth shooting menu begins with live view shooting, which you can set to enable or disable. The AF method menu item is where you can set the AF mode for live view. Continuous AF will simply allow you to enable or disable the camera's continuous autofocus for live view. Under Grid Display, you can select a framing grid to be displayed on the LCD monitor during live view to assist in composition and to check for tilted horizon lines. Next, there is the aspect ratio setting. Here you can choose the aspect ratio for the image capture. Note that raw images will always be saved at the 3:2 aspect ratio. Exposure simulation is next. This setting will allow you to display and simulate the brightness of what the final image's exposure will be. The sixth shooting menu begins with silent live view shooting with two modes. In mode 1, shooting is quieter than in normal live view. In mode 2, you can press and hold the shutter button after the photo has been taken to further minimize sound. When you release the shutter button to the halfway position, normal picture taking will resume. The last menu item in the shooting menu is metering timer. With this option, you can change how long the exposure setting or auto lock exposure time is displayed. Now let's take a look at the 7D Mark II's AF menus with 5 tabs. The first AF menu has 6 different cases that will allow you to quickly and easily fine-tune the AI Servo AF settings for your scenario. Each of these cases are discussed in greater detail in Chapter 6 of this guide. The second AF menu begins with AI Servo First Image Priority. With this setting, you can set how much priority to be given to focus versus releasing the shutter when the shutter button is pressed. The AI Servo Second Image Priority setting allows you to choose whether you'd like shooting speed or focus to be the priority when the shutter button is pressed. When continuous shooting, you can select speed to have the camera continuously take pictures regardless of whether focus has been achieved. The third AF menu begins with Lens Electronic MF. With this option, you can choose whether or not to use the electronic focusing ring that is available on certain lenses. Next, there is AF Assist Beam Firing, which will allow you to enable or disable an optional Speed Light's AF Assist Beam in low light conditions. Next, there is the One-Shot AF Release Priority. Just like with the AI Servo Release Priority, you can choose whether or not to allow the camera to take the picture if focus has not been achieved. The fourth AF menu begins with Lens Drive when AF impossible. This allows you to choose whether you'd like the lens to keep searching or stop searching when focus cannot be achieved. Next, there is Selectable AF Point, which allows you to choose how many of the 65 AF points you'd like to use. The next option is Select AF Area Selection Mode. Here, you can select the modes you'd like to be accessible when you're shooting. Next, there is AF Area Selection Method. You can choose to select the AF area using the multifunction button and AF area selection lever, or you can select the main dial and AF area selection lever. With the Orientation Linked AF Point menu item, you can choose whether to use the same AF point in both horizontal and vertical orientations, or you can choose to use a separate AF point for each. Initial AF point auto selection is next. With this menu item, you can choose the starting AF point for the camera to use for autofocus. If you choose Initial Auto AF Point Selected, you'll manually select the AF point. If you choose Manual Selection, the AF point that was selected before the AF area selection mode was changed will be used. And if you choose Auto, the camera will automatically choose the initial AF point. The next option is Auto AF Point Selection EOS ITR AF. When enabled, this setting will autofocus by recognizing faces and subject colors. The fifth AF menu begins with Manual AF Point Selection Pattern, where you can choose the method for scrolling when selecting an AF point. You can choose to have the camera stop at the outer edge, or you can have the camera start at the opposite AF point when you keep scrolling. Under AF Point Display During Focus, you can choose how you'd like the AF points to be shown in the viewfinder when you're selecting the AF point or area, and when the camera is focusing. Next, there is Viewfinder Display Illumination. This is where you can choose whether or not to have the focus point shown in red when focus has been achieved. Next, there is AF Status in Viewfinder, where you can choose whether you'd like the autofocus indicator to be shown inside or outside the field of view in the viewfinder. The Autofocus Micro Adjust menu item will allow you to fine-tune the AF's point of focus. Note that this menu item is usually not necessary, and using it may prevent correct focus from being achieved. Let's take a look at the playback menus now. The first three menu items in the first playback menu are Protect, Rotate, and Erase Images, where you can select the methods for protecting, rotating, and erasing images. Next, there is the Print Order option, which will allow you to choose the method for printing images directly from the camera when you're using a compatible printer. Next, there is Photo Book Setup, where you can select images to be copied to a specific folder on your computer using the supplied software. This makes it easier to create and print a photo book. Next, there is Image Copy, which will allow you to copy images between the camera's memory cards. Next, there is raw image processing, which will allow you to make adjustments to a raw image and save a JPEG copy to the memory card. The second playback menu starts with the resize option, where you can save a smaller version of an image as a JPEG to the memory card. The rating menu allows you to assign a star rating of 1 through 5 to your images. Under slideshow, you can set up the camera to display a slideshow of the images. This is a particularly useful feature when the camera is connected to a TV. The next menu item, Image Transfer, will allow you to select which images that you'd like to transfer to your computer. Next, there is Image Jump, where you can choose the method for the camera's image jump feature. The third playback menu starts with the Highlight Alert option, where you can choose to have the camera warn you of areas in the image that are too bright and have lost detail. The AF point display setting will allow you to choose whether or not you'd like the AF point that achieved focus to be displayed on the image during playback. Next, there is Playback Grid, which will allow you to display a framing grid over images in playback. Under histogram display, you can choose to have either the brightness histogram or the RGB histogram displayed in image playback. With movie play count, you can choose to display either the recording time or the time code during movie playback. Under magnification, you can choose the level and method of magnification for images in playback. And Control over HDMI will allow you to use a compatible TV's remote to control playback operations when the camera is connected via an HDMI cable. Now let's take a look at the camera's setup menu. First, there is Record Function Card Folder Selection. This menu item allows you to choose the method for how images are saved to the two memory cards. Next, there is File Numbering, which allows you to choose how the camera names the image and movie files. Under File Name, you can customize the image file names with your own prefix. The Auto Rotate menu item will allow you to choose whether or not you'd like vertical images to be automatically rotated in playback and on the computer. Format Card will allow you to format the memory cards. The second setup menu starts with Auto Power Off, which allows you to choose how long the camera should wait before going into sleep mode when it's not in use. LCD Brightness will allow you to adjust the LCD monitor's brightness. The next two options are Date, Time Zone, and Language, which will allow you to set the camera's date, time, and language. The Viewfinder Grid Display setting will allow you to show a framing grid to assist with the composition in the viewfinder. GPS Digital Compass settings allow you to set up the camera to use the built-in GPS. The third setup menu begins with Video System, where you can select NTSC or PAL. If you're in the United States, you'll want to select NTSC. Next, there is Battery Info, where you can view important information about the battery life. Sensor Cleaning will allow you to automatically clean the image sensor. The Info button and Rate button menu items will allow you to customize the functions of those buttons. Next, there is HDMI frame rate, which will allow you to choose an HDMI output frame rate that is compatible with an optional external recording device. The fourth setup menu begins with Custom Shooting Mode, which is where you can register one of the camera's 3 custom shooting modes. Next, there is Clear All Camera Settings, which allows you to reset the camera to factory default. You can use the Copyright Information setting to enter your copyright information to be saved to the metadata for each image. Certification Logo Display will simply show some of the camera's certifications, and the firmware version will allow you to update the camera's firmware. Now let's take a look at the 7D Mark II's Custom Functions menu. The first two menu items in the first menu are Exposure Level and ISO Speed Increments. where you can choose either 1/3 or 1/2 stop increments for the exposure level and ISO speed. Next, there is bracketing auto cancel, which will allow you to choose whether to have the bracketing settings canceled automatically when the camera is powered off. Under bracketing sequence, you can set the order for bracketed images to be taken. Number of bracketed shots allows you to shoot 3, 2, 5, or 7 shots when using exposure or white balance bracketing. The Safety Shift menu item allows you to set the camera to automatically change the exposure settings in certain shooting modes when the image is going to be very overexposed. The next menu item is Same Exposure for New Aperture, which will allow you to choose how you'd like the camera to compensate for a shift in aperture settings when a different lens, lens extender, or a zoom lens is attached to the camera. The second Custom Functions menu begins with Set Shutter Speed Range, where you can simply choose the range of shutter speeds that you'd like to be able to use. You can set the highest and lowest shutter speeds. Set Aperture Range is next, where you can choose the range of aperture settings that you'd like to be able to use. You can choose the minimum and maximum aperture settings. Continuous Shooting Speed is next, where you can choose the number of shots you'd like the camera to record per second in the continuous high speed, continuous low speed, and silent continuous drive modes. The third Custom Functions menu begins with Focusing Screen, which will allow you to set up the camera to use an optional focusing screen. Next, there is Warnings in Viewfinder, which will allow you to choose which items you'd like the camera to warn you about in the viewfinder. Next, there is Live View Shooting Area Display. This option allows you to choose whether you'd like Live View Display to be masked or outlined when shooting at different aspect ratios. The next menu item, Dial Direction During Shutter Aperture Priority, allows you to set the direction for the main dial when setting the shutter speed and aperture. Next, there is Multifunction Lock Setting, where you can choose which controls to lock when the lock switch is set to lock. The next menu item is Custom Controls, where you can customize the functions of many of the camera's buttons and dials. The fourth Custom Functions menu begins with Add Cropping Information. This will allow you to set the camera to display vertical lines for the aspect ratio you select. The Default Erase Option menu item will allow you to select whether Cancel or Erase is selected by default when you press the Erase button in playback mode. The final Custom Functions menu has only one menu item, Clear All Custom Functions. This will allow you to set all of the custom functions back to factory default. The last menu on the 7D Mark II is My Menu. With this menu, you can register any of your frequently accessed menu items for quick access. To register a menu item to My Menu, you'll first need to add a My Menu tab. Select Add My Menu tab and select OK. Now select Configure and select Items to Register. Now, scroll through the items and press Set to select one that you'd like to register and select OK. You can continue registering items to My Menu in the same way. When you're finished registering items to My Menu, press the menu button twice to return to the top menu in My Menu. The items that you registered will be listed. Within the Configure My Menu option, you'll also be able to sort and delete menu items, as well as delete and rename My Menu tabs. The Canon 7D Mark II includes several features that will allow you to fine-tune and enhance the color and tone of your images, as well as apply creative effects. In this chapter, we'll discuss white balance, picture styles, auto lighting optimizer, highlight tone priority, and HDR. White balance is determined by the color temperature of light sources, which is measured in degrees Kelvin. The higher color temperatures, measured in the area of 5600 Kelvin to 7500 Kelvin, represent situations like a sunlit or cloudy day. These shooting situations have a greater amount of blue tones and a lesser amount of red tones. Lower color temperature situations are measured in the area of 800 Kelvin down to 1900 Kelvin and are found in lighting situations like standard lighting from a tungsten light bulb or candlelight. These types of lighting situations are found on the lower end of the spectrum and produce greater amounts of red tones and lesser amounts of blue tones. To access the white balance settings, press the white balance button and rotate the quick control dial while watching the LCD panel or LCD monitor. You can also set the white balance in the quick control screen. Press the quick control button and use the multi-controller to navigate to the white balance setting. Press Set to view the options. The first option is Auto White Balance. With this setting, the camera will attempt to automatically adjust the color temperature. The next white balance setting is Daylight. Daylight is a great setting for taking pictures in the sunlight. This setting is marked with a sun icon. Use the Shade setting when you're taking pictures in the shade. It reduces the bluish tones in a picture. This setting is marked by an icon of a house with shade. Use the Cloudy setting when taking pictures on days that are overcast. This is marked with a cloud icon. The next white balance setting is Tungsten Light. This is a good setting to use when taking pictures under common light bulbs. It reduces the reddish tones in a picture. This setting is marked with a light bulb icon. The White Fluorescent Light setting is great for taking pictures under common fluorescent lighting. The next setting is the Flash setting. Use this setting when using an external flash unit. The next icon is the Custom White Balance option. Use this setting when you want to manually set the white balance for a specific light source for the best accuracy. The next white balance setting is Color Temperature, and it's marked with a K icon. Use this setting when you know the color temperature of the light that you're shooting under. Rotate the main dial to select the color temperature. Let's walk through setting a custom white balance on the 7D Mark II. First, you'll need to take a picture of a plain white object in the lighting that you're shooting under. Now, you'll need to set that image as the custom white balance reference. This is done in the menu system under the second shooting menu. Here, select Custom White Balance and select the photo of the white object. Press Set and select OK. Then press Set again to confirm the white balance setting. With the 7D Mark II, you can fine-tune any of the white balance settings to give the same effect that you would get from a color compensating filter. To do this, enter the camera's second shooting menu and select White Balance Shift Bracket. Now you can use the multi-controller to position the cursor on the grid. Placing the cursor toward the A will increase the amber in the image. Placing the cursor toward the G will increase the green in the image. Placing the cursor toward the B will increase the blue in the image. And placing the cursor toward the M will increase the magenta in the image. Picture styles are an intuitive way for you to tell the camera what levels of sharpness, contrast, saturation, and color tone you would like for your specific shooting scenario. The camera has 7 different preset picture styles, and you can make adjustments to settings in each of them. To access the picture styles, press the Creative Photo button. Press Set to access the picture styles. Use the Quick Control dial or multi-controller to select a picture style. First, there is the Auto Picture Style. This is a good general use picture style. The camera will automatically adjust color tone to fit the scene that you're photographing. This is a good picture style for photos of greenery, nature, outdoor, and sunset scenes. The Standard Picture Style is also a good general use picture style, and it's suitable for most scenes. Images taken with this picture style will look vivid, sharp, and crisp. The Portrait Picture Style is great for portraits, particularly close-ups. It offers pleasant skin tones and makes the image appear a little softer. The landscape picture style is good for taking pictures of scenery outdoors. This picture style makes the greens and blues in the image more vivid. The neutral picture style is a good setting to choose if you wish to process your images with your computer. Colors in this picture style are natural and subdued. The faithful picture style is also a good setting to choose if you're processing your images with your computer. When shooting under normal daylight, the color is adjusted to match the subject's color. The image is overall dull and subdued. The monochrome picture style is useful if you would like to take black and white photographs. Note, unless you are shooting in RAW, images taken in this setting cannot be converted to color later. All of these picture styles are fully customizable. Select a picture style that you would like to customize and press the Info button. You can make changes to the sharpness, contrast, saturation, and color tone. Select a parameter that you'd like to make adjustments to and press Set. Now use the multi-controller or quick control dial to adjust the setting. Press Set to confirm the adjustment, or press the menu button to cancel. In addition to the 7 preset picture styles, there are also 3 user-defined picture style options. These options allow you to select and adjust a picture style to your liking and save it for future use. To register a user-defined picture style, first select the user-defined picture style that you'd like to register and press the Info button. Press Set to choose a base picture style to customize and make your selection using the multi-controller. Now use the Set button and quick control dial to make adjustments to any of the parameters. When you're finished, press Menu to save changes to a user-defined picture style. Now let's discuss the 7D Mark II's Auto Lighting Optimizer. With this feature, you can improve contrast and detail in shadow areas of your photo automatically. You can access the Auto Lighting Optimizer in the Quick Control screen. Press the Quick Control button and select the Auto Lighting Optimizer setting. Here you can select Disable, Low, Standard, or High. Images may have increased noise with this feature depending on the scenario. Also, if you're using exposure compensation to darken the image while the Auto Lighting Optimizer is active, the exposure compensation may not work as intended, and you may need to disable the Auto Lighting Optimizer. Another feature that is similar to the Auto Lighting Optimizer is the Highlight Tone Priority. With this feature, you can retain detail and highlight areas of your photos. To enable this feature, go to the camera's third shooting menu and select Highlight Tone Priority. Here, select Enable. Another feature on the 7D Mark II is HDR, which will allow you to capture artistic HDR photos in camera. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range. It's a technique that's used in photography to capture creative photos of dramatically lit subjects. The HDR effect is created when 3 differently exposed images are combined to create a single photo that shows a super realistic range of shadows and highlights. To capture an HDR photo, press the Creative Photo button, select HDR, and press Set to access the HDR options. First, there is the Adjust Dynamic Range setting, which will determine the level of variation in exposure between the shots that will be combined to make the final image. You can choose Auto, 1, 2, or 3 exposure steps. Choosing 1 will combine 3 images with slight variation in exposure, and choosing 3 will combine images with more dramatic differences in exposure. Next, there is Effect Setting. You can choose from Natural, Art Standard, Art Vivid, Art Bold, and Art Embossed. The natural setting will preserve a wide range of tones that would otherwise be lost. Art Standard will preserve more detail than natural, but the image will also have less contrast and appear flatter. Subjects in images taken with Art Standard will have outlines around their edges. The Art Vivid setting will create an HDR image with more saturated colors than the Art Standard setting and will create a graphic effect. The Art Bold setting will create an image that is more saturated and will make the subject pop with the look of an oil painting. The last setting, Art Embossed, will capture an image with low saturation and contrast. Overall, the image will appear flat and old, but with bright and dark outlines at the subject's edges. The next setting you'll need to select in the HDR options is Continuous HDR. You can choose to have only one shot be HDR, or you can choose to have every shot be HDR. Next, there is Auto Image Align, which will automatically align the three images that will be combined to create the final HDR image. If you're using a tripod, you'll want to set this to Disable. If you're hand-holding the camera, you'll want to choose Enable. The last option to adjust is Save Source Images. If you select all images, the camera will save all of the photos that were used to create the HDR image as separate files. If you select HDR only, the camera will only save the final HDR image to the memory card. When you're finished making your selection, simply take the picture as you normally would. The camera will take 3 shots at high speed and combine them to create the HDR image. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about your Canon 7D Mark II. We know this new information will give you enough confidence and know-how to get the most out of your camera. Remember, you can refer back to any section of this guide at any time. Just select the topics that you want to review from the main menu or table of contents. Watch for more QuickPro guides on newly released cameras. Thanks for watching.